Please take your seats. We're going to start in a moment. Please take your seats. Good afternoon. Please take your seats. In case of need, there is interpretation into the Turkish language available. We have called this press conference to announce the elections of yesterday's International Election Observation Mission for yesterday's parliamentary elections here in Turkey. My name is Andreas Baker. I'm Director of Elections with the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. This observation mission is a joint endeavor with several institutions, so we'll take statements by the heads of the missions, after which there'll be an opportunity for questions. At the end of the press conference, there will be our preliminary statement, as well as a press release available in English and in Turkish outside the room, as well as on our websites. So without further ado, I would like to ask Ignacio Sanchez-Amor, who is appointed OSCE Special Coordinator and leader of the short-term OSCE Observer Mission, Member of Parliament from Spain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Good afternoon to all. While Turkish citizens could choose between genuine and strong political alternatives in these highly polarized elections, the rapidly diminishing choice of media outlets and restriction on freedom of expression in general impacted the process and remain serious concerns. Physical attacks on party members, as well as the significant security concerns, particularly in the southeast, further impose restrictions on the ability to campaign. Taking into account this context, most contestants were generally able to convey their messages to the electorate. Nonetheless, the campaign overall was low-key, with only increased visibility in the last 10 days. If implemented fully and effectively, the legal framework is generally conducive to holding democratic elections. However, certain fundamental restrictions are unduly restricted by legislation. The elections were well organized by the election administration, and election day was generally peaceful. Women played an active role in the campaign, and I personally met with several prominent and effective candidates. However, with no special legal obligation for the parties to nominate women candidates, I understand that the result will unfortunately be fewer women in the parliament. As I mentioned, we have serious concerns about the media framework. While there are a variety of outlets, the media is clearly under serious pressure in this country. Criminal investigations of journalists and media outlets for support of terrorism and defamation of the president has had a chilling effect on media. Having met with representatives of the IPEC media group just 3 days before the elections, I personally got a feeling for the impact this is having on the process. To reiterate, our main conclusions are that the elections offered voters a variety of choices. The challenging security environment, in particular in the southeast, coupled with a high number of violent incidents, including attacks against party members, campaign staff, and party premises, hindered contestant ability to campaign freely. Media freedom remains an area of serious concern, and the number of criminal investigations for journalists and the closure of some media outlets reduces voters' access to a plurality of views and information. The 10% parliamentary threshold continues to limit political pluralism. This was a polarized campaign, but with the votes now counted, I do expect that the political forces will work in a constructive manner to the benefit of all Turkish citizens. This is particularly important in the context of the violence in the southeast and the peace process. Our mission was a joint observation process, so I'll give my colleagues an opportunity to offer their views. Mr. Baker.
Thank you. I would now like to call on Mr. Andreas Gross, head of the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe delegation, a member of Parliament from Switzerland.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Baker. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to evaluate an election, you have to evaluate the process. It's the quality of the process which makes the quality of the election. And we did that in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe's delegation already in the monitoring committee since the 5th of June. We did it in a pre-electoral mission and now with our colleagues of the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE. And just to add to what my colleague Ignacio said, unfortunately we come to the conclusion that this campaign was unfair and it was characterized by too much violence, by too much fear. And fear is the enemy of democracy, enemy of a free choice. And in this sense, we are disappointed of the quality of the process. And in light of this, it's even more vital, and this is an appeal, that the President works in the future for a more inclusive political process. He does not overdo with his power he got, and he deals with the problem facing Turkey, ensuring that all our voices, also those who lost now the elections, are better heard. He has to unite again what has been divided in the last 5 months, and we appeal to him to do this in a very wise way and not in a militant way, how it happened in the last 5 months. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll now ask Ms. Margareta Sederfeld, head of the delegation of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, a member of Parliament from Sweden.
Thanks, Mr. Baker. Ladies and gentlemen, I will fully agree with what my colleagues have said, but would like to add some remarks on behalf of OSCE parliamentarians. The delegation I headed deployed a mission of 45 people from 19 different countries to 4 major urban areas for election day. While I was in Ankara yesterday, I also traveled to Diyarbakir last week to personally get an impression of the situation in the area. The violence in the largely Kurdish southeast of the country had a significant impact on the election, and the recent attacks and arrests of members and activists, predominantly from the HDP, is of concern as it hindered their ability to campaign. For an election process to be truly democratic, candidates need to feel that they can campaign, and voters need to feel that they can cast their ballots in a safe and secure environment. In some areas affected by violence, a significant number of polling stations were relocated within the respective neighborhood. This fact alone demonstrates how vital security is during the election process. With the criminal investigation of journalists and the effective takeover of some outlets, including just a few days before the vote, media freedom was dealt a blow during the election campaign. This is problematic for the journalists, for the voters. It is the Turkish citizens that suffer when they are not able to fully inform themselves about their options through a diverse range of media outlets. While it is true that there was a variety of political options for voters to choose between, I must reiterate that the 10% threshold, the highest among the OSCE's 56 parliaments, limits the political pluralism in the parliament. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. And I would also like to particularly thank all the Turkish people who have worked very hard yesterday to conduct the election. Thanks.
Thank you. And then I would ask Ambassador Arendt, who's head of the Limited Election Observation Mission deployed by the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights.
Thank you, Andreas. Ladies and gentlemen from the media, good afternoon. Since late September, the OSCE long-term limited election observation mission has been stationed in 9 cities of the Republic of Turkey. The mission has followed closely the run-up to yesterday's elections. In line with ODIHR's methodology, it did not carry out systematic or comprehensive observation of election day activities, yet visited a number of polling stations observing election day procedures. The mission is grateful to the authorities, in particular the government and the Supreme Board of Elections, for good cooperation, and thanks all election stakeholders for meaningful conversation in a friendly atmosphere and for many contacts that allowed us to get the information necessary for a serious observation. We very much appreciate the contribution that our Turkish staff members have made to our effort, and we shall not forget the traditional hospitality that we have experienced in this great country. Once again, our assessment based on our observation over the past 5 weeks is not only black and white. While there are positive elements, there are also shortcomings. The campaign was lively and there was a high voter turnout. However, serious security concerns hindered free campaigning. Other positive points were the impressive commitment of all participants, the use of other languages than Turkish, the possibility of out-of-country voting, a competent election administration, and a generally peaceful and well-conducted election day. Further negative points were the seizure of opposition media outlets, biased coverage by the public broadcaster, unacceptable pressure on journalists critical of the ruling party, the use of official position and state resources for campaigning by the government, problems in the legal framework such as a lack of judicial recourse against decisions by the Supreme Board of Elections. I hope that the relevant authorities will consider the message in today's statement, as well as the recommendations in the ODIHR final report to come in about 8 weeks' time and engage in a substantive follow-up of these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have a little bit of time for a few questions. Right down here, please. There should be a microphone. Please introduce yourself and your media outlet.
Yes, hello. My name is Burak Akıncı from Agence France Presse, the French news agency. I have just one simple question. According to your overall observations, do you think that these elections were fair?
Well, I must say that we normally refrain from these generalizations. We look at all the aspects of an election and then take position to the different aspects which we have mentioned, and those points that I have, for example, mentioned as being negative were certainly points that were not fair, but I do not want to give a general assessment of the entire election. Thank you.
As my colleague Gross said, we have to observe the whole procedure and the whole process. I could understand you need a headline, but it's more complicated than that. We talk about the campaign and we note some problems and concerns and serious concern, but at the same time we talk about a very professional manner conducting the voting day, and apparently the counting and the results has been no challenge for any of the contestants or any of the other observers. That means the process is complex. It's not fair to use just fair or not to address the whole process.
I understand that you don't ask me because I already answered your question, but I can also repeat it in French when you want. But for me, it's clear that the process was not fair. The elections were free, because freedom means that you have a diverse choice of the spectrum of political scale, but it was not fair. The competition was not fair, and that's why it also sheds some doubts, some shadows over the result.
And I did highlight two problems that I find very important. It's the lack of media freedom, and it's also the violence that have been during the whole election campaign, and especially in the southeast of Turkey.
Thank you. I've got another question at the back there, the gentleman in the brown.
Hello, Johnny Hogg, Reuters News Agency. This is not the first time that you've deployed electoral observation missions here in Turkey. I wonder whether it's possible to ask whether or not some of the problems that you've raised previously, whether they're getting any better, or whether the trend is that the democratic process in Turkey around elections is getting worse.
Well, of course, after our mission, we delivered some recommendations, but as you know, the recommendations from the June elections has been addressed to a special, particular political situation with a short term for the parliament. That means the main concern we raised in the past stays in place. For example, Turkey has to regulate the presence of independent observation in the ballot centers, because a civic organization has used the trick of use the label of a party. We think, we noted that the 3% threshold has to be revised in our view. Of course, the legislation amendment, including more transparency. And there are some other technicalities, for example, the judicial review of the decisions of the electoral administration. But we could understand that in this former period, there were no time to address this situation because, of course, there was an interim situation in the government and in the parliament.
I remember very well our recommendation 4 years ago, and when you look to these recommendations, you had one who was taken up and today changed. You have been allowed to campaign in Kurdish language. That was a clear shortcoming 4 years ago, where we mentioned very clearly, also in our reports of the post-monitoring missions. And in this way, it's a clear improvement. And on the other hand, when you look to the freedom of those who disagree with the majority, who disagree with the mainstream, their situation was much less well defended.
I do want to also to add one example that I find very important for Turkey to improve is the 10% threshold. It limits the possibility for parties to be elected and to enter the parliament, and this means that it also limits the possibilities for people to express their free will. We have a code of conduct from OSCE PA, and we have made remarks before, and we will continue to make remarks until they are fulfilled. Thanks.
I mean, OSCE long-term observation missions have, after each of the 4 elections which we have observed preceding this one in this country, a whole list of recommendations. And it is true that recommendations of June regarding the June elections could not be put into practice because Parliament, much of it is legislative, could not do it. But most of the 2011 recommendations, which we have in our final report of 2011, have also not been addressed. And that is something which I think might need some more activity by the way of the competent authorities.
Thank you. I had a question down here.
Hi, Kareem Shaheen from The Guardian. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how the crackdown on media and the criminal investigations against journalists has impacted the election process?
On the Thursday before the election day, we visit the media group that had a limited close down during the election, and also where the chief editor was asked to take a pause in his job duties until the upcoming Tuesday. That's one example. I know that I have met also with medias that work with internet, and they have also some points on difficulties to keep the access open. And there are more practical examples, but they will be in our final report. Thanks.
It's not just the legal framework, because similar provisions are in different criminal codes. But it's the, let's say that way, the abuse of for example, the crime of defamation of the press against journalists who create this situation. Of course, this is a provision, is well known all over. The question is the use. If the prosecutors are using continuously this accusation against terrorists, you create a climate inside the professions that finally conducts to self-restriction or auto-censor.
Concerning the impact, it goes beyond, so to say, the media field. It's a contribution to a polarization and to a radicalization, to a violation of the discourse type. Rivals become enemies, and it's not a competition anymore to find out what is the common good in the common interest. It reduces a competition to black and white positions. And this is the huge responsibility of those who are behind this.
I think I have a question right here in the third row.
Today there are some reports that some of the observers might be in your team or might be out of your team. That some of the observers in southeastern and eastern part of Turkey had faced with some pressure that they were not allowed to enter to the ballots. Are there anybody from your team who couldn't be allowed, who wasn't allowed to reach the election ballots, especially in southeastern and eastern part? And secondly, I wonder if you had covered the areas where the military operations curfews were declared, and which are these towns? Would you share with us?
From the OSCE PA, as I said, we were 45 people from 19 countries, and mostly located in the urban areas. I would like to say mostly urban areas. And as I understood, there were one observer's team who had difficulties to enter the polling stations. And that's of course, not good. That's what I would like to say. Thanks.
From the Council of Europe, colleagues, about from 30 people, we had a team of a Swiss and an Italian colleague who was not allowed to enter as observers because the president, the chairperson, did not know that it's normal. That was in a close to Ankara, not in the southeast or somewhere there. But I don't overestimate, and others had problems to make clear that they have the right and to overcome also the police efforts to get the identities of the observers. I understand that many of these Turkish colleagues are not used to have observers in the country. I don't overestimate it. The second question you ask is much more, I think, relevant in the sense that we have to admit that we could not go to these difficult regions because no insurance company would have paid the risk for our colleagues, and we didn't want to put into danger our colleagues' lives. And this is one of the weaknesses of our mission, that where we should have been especially, we could not be out of logic reasons. But we listen to those who have been there, and we listen to those who share with us their impressions from there. But this makes us a little bit modest also, because we should have been there, of course. And I was in the last 10 years many times in these regions, and I always wanted to go there. But this time it was not possible.
We had problems in seven polling stations to enter the International Commission. We visited, I think, about 500. Of course, it's a limited observation mission, as my colleague Ross noted. But the problem was not ours, but more in the first period of the voting day for the civic organizations who had party levels to observe, namely Vote and Beyond, who had some problems in the first hours that were solved in the next 3 or 4 hours, and finally they reached to enter, at least with the information we had at this moment.
Well, I can share with you an experience I had yesterday afternoon in Eskişehir. We were in a polling station, and a woman walked up to us with a white badge. She said that she was for the AKP, the boss of this floor there, and she said that we were an NGO and we had no right to observe there. Then we tried to explain we were not an NGO. Then she grossly insulted my Turkish assistant. First she said she was insane for working for us, and then she said a few other things which the assistant did not translate for me because it was so bad. It seems that these floor and building bosses have been around in some other polling stations as well, at least that's what we were told. It was a very unpleasant experience, and I informed the policeman who was outside of the polling station.
Thank you. We have limited time, but I can take 2 more questions. One right at the back there, please.
...7 Haziran seçimlerinde yanlış hatırlamıyorsam seçimlerinden sonra hazırladığınız raporda Cumhurbaşkanı Erdoğan'ın taraflı tutumuna eleştiri getirmiştiniz. Seçim sonuçlarını tekrar. Tamam. Tamam. Tamam mı? Bu yönde bir eleştiri getirmiştiniz, seçim sonuçlarını etkilediği yönünde. Eğer yanlış hatırlıyorsam lütfen düzeltin. Bu seçimde 1 Kasım seçimlerine ilişkin benzer bir gözleminiz oldu mu? Cumhurbaşkanı Erdoğan'ın tutumunu nasıl değerlendirirsiniz?
If we were noted the same situation that in June, of course we had to rise. It is not the case. Apparently the way of acting of the President Erdogan in this campaign has been more subtle, asking, conducting his agenda. I repeat what I said in June, the President is completely free and has the full right to address his people following his own political agenda. The only question we raised in June was that doing so, he entered in campaign. It has been the case, at least in a clear way, that was in June, and for that we didn't raise the issue in our statement.
Thank you. I have time for one more question, if necessary. Down here.
My name is Alparslan Esmer from Voice of America Turkish Service, and I was just wondering, there has been some increased security presence in some of the polling centers, especially in the southeast. I'd like to get your opinion on that. Was this, in fact, necessary as the government was claiming to be, or actually, what would you say about this, like the presence of masked sentries and armored vehicles present in election centers?
Well, as I said in my contribution, we have not conducted a systematic observation of polling stations, but just seen a few of them. The ones I have seen had the police at the distance that is prescribed by the law, but particularly in the southeast of the country on election day. We had 2 long-term observers in Diyarbakir, we had 2 in Adana and 2 in Erzurum, and then there was 1 team of parliamentarians in Erzurum. So we did not really cover these areas.
And I would like to add, because I was in Diyarbakir a few days before the election, that there has, under a long time, been a lack of, there have been violence in the southeast part of Turkey for a long time, and I think it's very important that the peace process start again between the Turkish state and the PKK. The lack of peace, or high rate of tension or conflict, it's important for everyone in the southeast that there will be peace and calm again. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's all we have time for today. The statement in both English and Turkish should be available outside as well as on our websites. Thank you.
Nie ma naszych przyjaciół.